Hey y'all, how are you doing? I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. It's me, Kim, and I'm back for another newsletter exclusive podcast. If you're encountering this podcast anywhere other than the newsletter, head on over to KimberlyNicoleFoster.co. That is where all of the extras will be, including any extra spontaneous thoughts I have after I finish recording this episode. Today, we're going to talk about AI, but really generative AI art. That has been on my mind a lot recently. But honestly, before we get into that, I just published this short clip where I'm talking about AI. Of course, I clipped it from the long for Harriet live stream last week. And there's just a couple of things that I want to say. I don't know how many times I have to reiterate this. I am not anti generative AI. I am not anti large language model. I am not anti chatbot. I have used them literally for years, championed them for years, literally sat across a table from Google executives and talked to them about large language models because I was using them before other people were using them. However, I am deeply concerned about the trust and the faith that people put into these technologies. These are commodities, these are products, and their utility is to enrich their founders, to enrich their shareholders. They're not neutral. Haven't we already learned from the social media debacle that assuming that these platforms are neutral, that they are not actively working to privilege certain kinds of information, minimize other kinds of information, create certain kinds of narratives, construct things in a very narrow way to shape our worldview? Haven't we learned that that is what they do? Shouldn't we approach these utilities, these technologies, with at least a little bit of skepticism? So my critique of the way that people engage ChatGPT is not because they're using ChatGPT. It's that they go to ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever other frontier model that has a chatbot. They enter their prompt and then the chatbot spits something else and then they just take that. That's what I'm questioning. The other day, I used Gemini, because sometimes I like to switch it up. I used Gemini to do some computational analysis, some data analysis for some NCES tables. NCES is the National Center for Education Statistics. You know, we were deep in that whole Black men, Black women going to college stuff. So I said, I just need to make sure that my ratios are right and whatever. I asked Gemini to give me some analysis, do it by race, do the breakdown by gender, and it gave me a ratio. And immediately I knew it was wrong because I could do the math roughly in my mind. I knew it was wrong. And I said, are you sure that that's right? That doesn't exactly look right. And then, like the freaking chatbots do, it said, oh, my bad. It didn't say my bad. I'm sorry. That's my African-American vernacular English. But it was like, oh, I apologize. You're right. I accidentally did this and this. And then I had to say, okay, well, could you compute it again and take me through every step that you do? I would not have been able to recognize the error if I couldn't do the math. That's the point. This idea about, oh, we should be so grateful that Sam Altman or Google DeepMind or Satya Nadella with Copilot and Microsoft, we should be so grateful that they're trying to democratize information. I am sorry. At this point, that's fake. I'm actually now of the view that the whole entire idea of democratization with regard to the internet is fake, but that's a different essay for another day. But because these LLMs are so prone to hallucination, because they are so prone to error, you can only know if there's a hallucination if you have at least a moderate understanding of the material. That's where we are. It might be something else in the future, but right now we're at, you don't even know if it's giving you bullshit unless you know what you're looking for. Now, I will say I have tried the deep research in Gemini, I've tried the deep research in ChatGPT and in Perplexity. That to me is useful because it gives you so many sources, but I'm still going to so many sources. Okay? The time saved is not in the analysis or the synthesis. The time saved is you helped me by compiling a list of so many sources. And if you can't sift through that information, you're still shit out of luck. The idea that these technologists are going to innovate us out of the need for critical thinking is nuts. And the other reason why y'all should be concerned is because the world increasingly is going to be divided by the people who can use their noggins and the people who can't. The people at the top of the knowledge and the understanding and the ability to think are getting further and further away from the people at the bottom. Have I talked about this before? Maybe I did it on the For Harriet stream last week, but if you look at the most recent literacy scores and math scores, the children who are doing the best are getting a lot better, and the children who are doing the worst are getting a lot worse. We used the internet in kindergarten, okay? So we were learning best practices. Do you click on Ask Jeeves? Do you click on Google? How do you search for things? How do you form your query? But we also learned how to thumb through the card catalog, right? We had lots of, honestly, this is why I say millennials are the last great generation, because we really got it all, okay? But we were children, so we really understood the literacy. And somebody brought up under that post, you know, that in China they're introducing 6-year-olds to AI. Great. Understanding how to use the tool is important. Now we have grown people who have no literacy. They don't understand the limitations of AI. They don't understand hallucinations. They don't understand the black box. Now, as a fake tech nerd girl, I do spend a lot of time trying to learn as much as I can about these technologies. They're not, when Sam Altman is doing his AGI is gonna eat the world stuff, he's not mentioning hallucination. He's not mentioning error. He's not mentioning bias. Generative AI is here to stay. It's never going away. But do we know how to use it? Do we understand how these things are supplements, not replacements? Supplements. At any rate, that's that on that. Back to my generative AI art thoughts. Okay, let's go back to the origin of these thoughts for me. About 2 weeks ago, OpenAI released a newer model. Not ChatGPT 5. We're still waiting on that, but there was just a core update to it dramatically improved the image generation abilities, and somebody used it to, now it's being called Ghiblify, which is take the style of Studio, or is it Ghibli? It's not Ghibli, right? Studio Ghibli, which is the animation style from the Japanese artist Hayao Miyazaki and the animation studio that he controls, and some Twitter nerd Ghiblified or Ghiblified. I'm sorry. You know, I've never seen Spirited Away. I'm sorry. It's not for me. I'm not that girl. You know, I'm an art girl. Yeah, I'm an art snob, but I'm not that girl. The anime people, y'all are different. We're not the same. Anyways, he took a family photo and recreated it in the style of Studio Ghibli. And that created, it was wildfire. It was everywhere. I saw them. I spend a little bit too much time on Threads now. I'm sorry. I'm embarrassing. But that stuff even made it to Threads. It was on Twitter. It was on Reddit. Literally millions of people were using ChatGPT to recreate their images in the style of Studio Ghibli. When I saw this trend gaining momentum, I immediately had a little bit of a, this is interesting. Something's changing. Something is shifting. because I think most people are either LLM agnostic or LLM skeptical. And I say LLM, not AI, because LLMs are a part of AI. Like they utilize AI, but like AI encompasses so many different things. And I'm trying to be specific. And LLMs are the primary infrastructure on which the chatbots are built. I told you I was a fake tech girl, okay? And so the chatbots are the interfaces placed on top of, to be crude, the large language models. And the chatbots are ChatGPT. Like it allows you to interact with the LLM and type in a prompt and get out a response. When I saw lots of normies engaging with ChatGPT seriously for the first time around uploading their images to get a Ghiblified version of themselves or their dog or their family or their vacation photos, I think that this is a turning point with regard to this technology's place in culture. That wall of skepticism, that barrier of suspicion, I think that for a lot of people, that's been torn down. And that is real good for Sam Altman. But of course, there's always going to be a group of AI skeptics, and that group is going to be comprised primarily of creatives, of creators, of writers, of artists, of people who describe themselves as aesthetes, people who feel like they are keepers, caretakers of cultural production. There's always going to be a wait a minute. And for the artists, the creators, the songwriters, the musicians in particular, that skepticism, that fear, that antagonism is very warranted because generative AI poses an existential threat to their ability to earn money from the things that they create. That's a real fear. But as I was walking through the Dallas Museum of Art on Sunday, something clicked in my mind. I thought, what if people really just don't care about art? What if all this time, artists, creatives have just vastly overestimated how much people care about art and artists and how invested they are in making sure that the thing that we think of as creativity can sustain itself. I think the fight against generative AI is valid. I think it is well reasoned. I think it's well intentioned, but I think it's a losing fight. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I really care, like a lot, and have always felt like I loved music more than most people, loved beautiful images more than most people, loved beautiful clothing and light and sound and color. But even when I was a little kid, I always felt like I was a tasteful person in a tasteless world. Maybe we're just back to the baseline. The baseline is a tasteless world that doesn't care about process, doesn't care about craft, doesn't really care about feeling beyond the most basic feelings because it doesn't interest them, it doesn't excite them, maybe they don't have time to care. The appeal of the Studio Ghibli remake is that it's frictionless, that it's so easy, and that ease is the part of the generative AI process that is so offensive and so outrageous to people who care about art. I think that creativity, real creativity, requires friction. Now, what we can really debate is the degree of friction required, but there is a certain amount of molding, crafting, refining, revising that makes the thing a thing. that means something. But most people don't want that. They don't care about that. They don't want the effort. I think most people's relationship to the finished product of art, of the song, of the album, of the painting, of the photograph is what it can do for them, what feeling it might be able to impart, how it might be able to give them more status or more access. Maybe the desire is momentary escapism. Maybe it's fleeting pleasure. But the idea of art for art's sake or the kind of spiritual process that Audre Lorde describes in poetry is not a luxury. Do you really think most people that they are approaching a painting, an album, a film with the desire to learn more about humanity? I don't think so. I really do feel for the artists. I feel for the people who are deeply concerned that they will soon no longer have the opportunity to make a living off of creation. I also think about how this period of time where artists have been able to really make money being creative is a historical anomaly. I am not saying this to justify Midjourney or OpenAI because Sam Altman really is. He is a nefarious character. I am saying this just to give more context. Again, walking through the museum, I thought about how much of that art was commissioned by really, really rich people. Read the little placards next to the paintings, next to the art objects that got turned into furniture, the settees, the couches, gorgeous, huge beds, the actual portraits commissioned by something, someone, an institution, a rich person. The murals, often commissions. Who was Beethoven composing for? Who was Haydn composing for? Who was Mozart composing for? Again, not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that feels like where we're going back to. Because there just aren't enough people who love art for art's sake. You guys, I hate to say it, but most people are Tyler Perry movie normies. They're Marvel movie normies. I had to put in the Marvel there because I don't want to, single out Tyler Perry. I don't want to be anti-black. But yeah, most of y'all are watching the tent pole studio IP movie trash. I mean, that's just like, you know? And then when Scorsese calls it out, one of the greatest filmmaker of his day or any other day, the medium of film was only like 100 years old. When he calls it out, people are like, how dare you? We love Captain America. Okay, all right. Well, look, that's where we are. People want art if it can help them pass time, if it can bring a different vibe to their living room wall. Maybe it can show off a little bit of their personal style, a little bit of their assumed identity. But most people aren't too into the textures, the colors, the references, the technique. Andre Leon Talley didn't lie when he said most people are boring, tacky, tasteless. They are. I'd also connect the growing anti-intellectualism with the increased or hastened disposal of art and the artist. What do I mean by that? So going back to Poetry is Not a Luxury by Audre Lorde, one of the central ideas is that the themes of poetry, the ideas that they help to illuminate, they're old, they're ancient, they reside deep within us. There's a history there, a foundation there. It seems to me that the primary mode of the tech bros, of the technologists. They want to obliterate history. It's out with the old, in with the new. It is, you move fast and break things. And it doesn't matter if the thing that you're breaking is sacred. It doesn't matter if it is old. It doesn't matter how much knowledge the thing contains, how much effort the thing took to come into creation. Because whatever is new and next is going to be better inherently just because it's new. I saw Sam Altman responded to the criticism, and he said that these tools are a net win for society. I don't know. The jury is still out. Again, I am not by any means anti these technologies. I'm just not gonna take his word for it. I don't think we should. What if some things are supposed to be hard? Is that Bootstraps Kimberly? I don't know. Bootstraps Kimberly has been making some appearances, but hey, consider the possibility that some things are supposed to be difficult. They're supposed to be painful. Oh, I've been really ingesting some inspiration porn recently. Again, this one, I won't even tell y'all what I was watching, but you can guess because it was a neurobiologist, I think, not a neuropsychologist, but anyways, a content creator who is also a professor and knows a lot about neurology. The other day, I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he talked about how there is a part of our brain that only gets activated when we do hard things, when we do things that take a lot of effort, when we do things that we don't want to do. And if we intentionally avoid struggle, if we intentionally avoid friction, then that part of our brain atrophies. Of course, I can't name the structure. I know some things, I don't know all that, but it really stood out to me because I actually feel like I've undergone that the part of my brain that used to be so good at doing hard things every single day has decreased in size. You got to work it out. You got to push through. I said all that to say that generative AI is here to stay, and it is going to hasten the aesthetic and intellectual flattening of society. Poetry is still not a luxury. There are certain kinds of, Lord used the word revelations in the piece, that you can only get to via pondering, interrogation, via interaction with work that stirs the senses, that helps you see and feel and imagine more deeply, more vibrantly. That is not generative AI. I've actually read papers about generative AI and creativity, and they're mixed. But this is where woo-woo Kim will come into play. I still deeply believe in the soul, still deeply believe in substance, in ineffable essence of humanity, the spark, if you will. These technologies can't replicate that. I don't care. They cannot replicate that spark, and they cannot replicate the inherent neuroplasticity of the brain. You're not going to be able to convince me otherwise. Not right now. Maybe in 5 years, but not today. Okay, well, that is all I have. I will talk to y'all next time. Bye.